What's up, Banter fam? Welcome back to the show. It's your host, Miles, and today's show, I'm going to be showing you 3 key price levels that I'm looking at right now, which are very, very important for the crypto market and are dictating whether I'm buying or whether I'm shorting at the moment. I'm also going to be going through some charts and look at some potential trade setups that I'm very interested in taking at the moment, and then we are going to dig deep into the depths of the Solana situation, which is quite worrying at the moment for both Solana fans and also proponents of decentralization alike, as I think it highlighted a lot of issues in the market. So those are the 3 topics we're going to be covering today. It's going to be a massive show. Let's get straight into it. I wanted to start with the Bitcoin chart at the moment and just have a look at what is happening in the market overall. So I've got the hourly chart up at the moment for Bitcoin, and I've got some ranges that I'm looking at for a potential short-term target. If you watched the show yesterday, Rand's show with Gareth Soloway and Sheldon, they are thinking that potentially, we do get an extended push to the upside in the very near future. Now, there's a catalyst I'll show you in a second, which I think is going to be a major reason behind why this could occur. But at the moment, we are seeing a little bit more strength come in for Bitcoin. Now, we know we had a very negative weekend with the 3AC and the Celsius news coming out. I did a massive thread on that, and I covered that on the Sunday show. Thank you guys for hanging out on the Sunday show. That was a lot of fun. And basically, that was, a mass liquidation event where 3AC and where Celsius were all getting liquidated all at once. And that was kind of leading to a broader market panic, which resulted in, this massive wick down that we saw here, down to the 17,600 region. Now, at the time, a lot of people were screaming for 14K, 12K, 10K, but now we've seen the market has slightly recovered a little bit. So is this kind of the end of this downtrend, or are we looking at more upside? The first thing I'll say in response to that question is that when we did get this, massive liquidation event, that's not an event we get very often in history. So historically, when we have had massive events like that, that has screamed, a buying opportunity. And I did get involved and scoop up some crypto, some Ethereum, etc. Down at these levels around the 18,000 level, because, from a DCA perspective, that was a pretty good risk reward level to be buying at. And if you were buying in this level, you'd note that this bottom of this blue box here, the bottom of the major support we've got at the moment from 17.3 up until around the 19K region, typically that is an okay region to DCA into. Historically, we know that is typical support and resistance, and that's a level that I'm interested in buying at. But am I buying right now? Am I trying to catch this next wave up? In the short term, no, but there are some trades that I'm looking at the moment which could potentially keep the dollars ticking over in the meantime. Before we get into those trades, before we look at the altcoins that I'm thinking of making a move on, I think it's also equally as important to have a look at Bitcoin on the daily and have a look at kind of the macro setup we have for Bitcoin at the moment. Zoom out a little bit and look at where we sit as a whole. So this was the kind of key start of this bear trend when we broke this major resistance at 38K. From then, we did see a little bit of a spiral from Bitcoin from a price perspective, and then we hit this trend here. We showed a little bit of a bear flag, and then we continued the continuation down into these this 17 to 19K zone. Now, these are the 2 blue boxes that I'm looking at as major accumulation zones, and these are big DCA zones, so they're not really short-term scalp trading zones. They're more major levels of support that I will be interested in heavily DCAing at, and that's the 17 to the 19K region. And of course, if this box didn't hold, which it actually did, which is, a good sign for Bitcoin, then we've got this next region of 12 to 14K, which is very, very strong. So those are the very 2 strong support levels. And if we go all the way back on the charts, on the weekly, we can see that this indicates this range here. This is the lower high of 2019. We see that this range is historically very, very important for Bitcoin. And we can also see that we have more ranges down under that, which are important. Obviously, the 10K mark is now, pointing out quite a psychological support level for Bitcoin, as it was previous resistance as well. So those are kind of my downside targets. But in the short term, what is the move here? Are we buying altcoins? Are we continuing to accumulate? Are we trading? Well, the first indicator that is kind of going to help us work out this question is the Bitcoin dominance. So surprisingly, typically when Bitcoin, has these major pushes up, we see the dominance rise really strongly in tandem with it. And on the flip side, when the Bitcoin price drops, we typically see altcoins perform much weaker than Bitcoin. So we see when Bitcoin has massive drops, when there's FUD in the market, historically, the Bitcoin dominance has risen because the altcoins have performed weaker relative to Bitcoin. Well, at the moment, we're seeing a very, very interesting trend emerge. And as you can see from the channel I've drawn in here, the Bitcoin dominance actually hit major resistance and got rejected despite the Bitcoin price declining, which means that altcoins are actually showing more strength in the market right now than Bitcoin. Now, this is a surprising trend because, as I said, typically we don't usually see that. But there's a couple reasons for this. Firstly, altcoins were actually sold off before Bitcoin. So we did see, the market going slightly risk off in the face of some adversity, some macro adversity. And then when the Bitcoin price started to unravel, since that was largely dictated by liquidations, a lot of the altcoins weren't at fault. So a lot of the alts in the market were not the cause of speculation, because the major positions that were at threat were actually the Celsius Bitcoin position, and then this Aave Ethereum position and the 3AC Ethereum position, which were the main kind of focal points of the market. So it took a little bit of the heat off the alts because they weren't being sold off as heavily, obviously because they aren't assets that are as highly collateralized and as highly borrowed and lended by these centralized platforms that we saw collapse over the last week or so. So that's one of the reasons why the dominance has actually held quite well. So what we do want to see is, if we get a major push up from Bitcoin, this next kind of level that I'm looking at is this, let's go into the hourly chart here, is this 21 to 23K level. So we can see that we are kind of flirting with this trend line at the moment. We were showing a continuation pattern to the upwards side, but we are facing now resistance at the 21,500 level, and then the 23K level is another major resistance. And this kind of channel here is one that I do expect to test in the near future. I think it's very likely that if we do break above this trend, retest this trend, we can come up and test these levels. And in tandem with that, what I would like to see is the Bitcoin dominance actually increasing in strength. It would indicate a bit of liquidity flowing back into the crypto markets. We know that for these altcoins to actually run, we need a bit of power behind Bitcoin. It's still the biggest coin. It's still the one dictating this market at the moment. So we do need some strength behind Bitcoin if we want to see strengths from the alts at the same time. And the Ethereum chart, looking equally as weak, as Bitcoin, in fact, even weaker. Obviously, that was the focal point of a lot of the concerns regarding, obviously, the staked ETH that was liquidated and then subsequently depegged, and then also a lot of the live liquidation positions that are on the market. But I said there might be a catalyst for a potential run-up. Now, I do think there is potential downside. You've seen my targets, my 12 to 14K target, and you've also seen my short-term target of 17 to 19K, but we do need a catalyst if we want to kind of break out of this rut. Now, this might be something that happens later in the year, but we have a little bit of an indication as to a potential market catalyst here. And that catalyst comes out of a very interesting comment that was made just 4 hours ago from the Fed. And they said, we don't have as far to go on QT as it might seem. Now, I find it quite interesting that, they were previously very, very hawkish in the meetings. We know that the next rate hike will likely be around the 75 basis point region before potentially it tapers down later in the year. But they did say we don't have as far to go on QT as it might seem. So a bit of a dampening of expectations at the moment. Maybe the Fed is seeing some of these markets, obviously the stock market, the crypto market, maybe getting a little bit worried here and just trying to kind of throw a bit of water on the flames to kind of calm things down a bit. Very interesting, that we're seeing this approach come out of the market, from the Fed right now, and that could be a potential catalyst later in the year. We know as soon as QT eases up, that is the exact macro catalyst we need to actually push to higher levels in Bitcoin. And I do think, honestly, that the second half of this year could be quite positive for Bitcoin. I've got a feeling that, there is further downside in the short term. However, I do feel like by the end of the year, we will see some of the macro uncertainty clear up. Maybe that's the hopeful side of me saying that. But, also yesterday on the show, I think Gareth and Sheldon also both agreed that after we kind of see this bottom get set, then it could be, potentially something that we look for later in the year. But, then that begs the question, what is the bottom? Is the bottom in yet? Is there further downside to go? And that's why I've highlighted 3 very key levels to have a look at. We know liquidations at the moment have been such a major reason behind, the market uncertainty, the market drops we've seen over the last couple of weeks. So the most important 3 figures that I'm looking at right now are the liquidations. So I want to go through the three major liquidations on the three biggest altcoins in the market right now, or at least the three hottest altcoins in the market right now, and have a look through them and have a look at potentially, whether that could trigger this bottom, this 12 to 14k bottom that could potentially come to fruition in accordance with this blue line that I'm looking at here. So three very important price levels I'll reveal to you now, and then afterwards we're going to go through a trade that I am looking at. It's actually a short setup that I'm looking at the moment to potentially take advantage of this swing. I did say Bitcoin is looking decently strong right now. We did see a pullback, a few hours ago, but we're looking like we do want to push up to the 21 to 23k region. Definitely a region I'm going to have a short at, just because I don't know if we gather too much steam beyond that. I'm happy to be stopped out and take the risk on this trade, but I am going to I'm still going to take it because I think that there is potential further downside in the short term before, we do see a clearance to have this next leg up. All right, let's look at these three key levels right now. And then let's have a look at that trade afterwards. All right. Big news. This is the biggest news of the last couple of days. And this is, the major story at the moment. And I have to talk about it because it is so important. And I think this news highlights both issues for crypto in general. It highlights centralization issues. It highlights the issue with decentralization and the kind of tug of war between need and want regarding decentralization. And then it also highlights three very key price levels, which could potentially dictate further downside here. So let's get into this thread a little bit and really dig deep into what this means for crypto prices. And this is basically off the back of the Celsius and 3AC position liquidations. We're seeing one of the biggest liquidations now on the line regarding one of crypto's largest L1s, and obviously that is Solana. And I want to go through what is happening on Solana and why you should care, because this has deep ramifications for crypto, in my opinion. And I know a lot of you hold Sol. I personally hold Sol, and I'm a proponent of Sol in general, but there are also some major issues that we do need to talk about. And it's kind of shaping up to be, the next big event, the next big trend in crypto. Firstly, I said I've got three liquidations I've got my eye on, and these are the three I've got my eye on. Celsius, which still have almost 24,000 wrapped Bitcoin, which is set to be liquidated at 13,604. We know right now that the Bitcoin price is performing a lot strongly. It's hovering in the range above the 13k region. We're still many percent away from a potential liquidation there, but it's still a very interesting one because things can change quickly. We know a lot of whales are hunting the Celsius position right now, and they're looking for this 13.6 region. Now, whether they can get it there is another question. Obviously, those whales need to push up in the market now to capture some more liquidity to send the alt spiraling again, if that is something they choose to do. We know that things can't just work linearly. The market just can't tank all at once. We do need these short-term reprieves and rallies to get a bit of confidence back into the market, a bit of stability before we can see another leg down. And if that is the case, then obviously Celsius is that major position that we have to keep our eye on. Now, yes, they can continue to add collateral to this position to push this down, but nonetheless, I think it does, spell trouble in general, this 13k region, which is, another reason why that is one of the blue boxes that I'm looking at, because if Celsius were to be liquidated at the top of this range, they could very well send us to the bottom of this blue box here, which is roughly sitting at the 12k mark, and obviously, the 10k is kind of next. This is the region that Celsius will be liquidated in. Once again, we're quite far away, but still have it on your radar. Keep track of this Celsius liquidation because it's important. The second piece of news is this Ethereum whale via Aave, which is set to be liquidated at $895. So a lot closer than the Bitcoin position. The $895 position happens just above this level of support that we did bounce on this, $885 region. Obviously, if we do touch that support again, then they're at risk of being liquidated, which would not be a good sign for Ethereum. We know Ethereum leads the alt, so we do need a strong Ethereum for strong altcoins. And then obviously the third position, and the one I want to talk about, because this is really the juicy one that comes with a massive story, is this Sol whale, which is going to be liquidated at $22.30. Currently, Solana is trading at 35.16. So let's have a look at Solana and actually have a look at what happened, because this is probably the biggest thing that's happening in crypto at the moment. Now, what actually happened is a Sol whale deposited 160 million on Solend to borrow 108 million dollars. So similar to what we saw with 3AC, a whale has gone in, deposited a specific amount, in this case 160 million, and they've used that to borrow 108 million against their position, essentially levering up their Solana position in order to go more risk on. So in order to use those assets to deploy in other areas. Now, this is very risky because as this position creeps closer and closer to liquidation, we've seen the Sol price, go down as low as the high 20s during this Bitcoin crash. It's began to trigger some fears that user funds can be put at risk. Now, obviously, user funds can be put at risk when a liquidation occurs from a pure price perspective, but there's another angle and another major reason why user funds could be put at risk by a potential liquidation here. And that is because Solana's a very unstable network in its current form. So the potential issues that it has faced and the issues that it's facing now mean that if there was a major on-chain event which could threaten the network, then the ramifications of that could be a lot bigger than your typical altcoin. We saw Roosh get liquidated on Phantom for 32 million, and that didn't really impact the chain at all. We've seen liquidations on Ethereum from 3AC, AVAX, that didn't really impact the chain's, how the chain operated at all. But the problem with Solana is that the Solana chain has had issues in the past. So obviously, it is more it's more prone to these potential downside occurring. And that's exactly why Solend Protocol decided to step in and try and stop this before it occurred. So Solend, if you don't know, is a platform on Solana. So it's a DAO, and it also has a borrowing and lending function. So Solend isn't Sol itself, but it is a protocol built on top of Solana. And they didn't want this whale to get liquidated. They really, really, really wanted to avoid this situation. So they actually came out and they said, we think the whale presents a systemic risk to Solend and its users, and that they think letting a liquidation of this size occur on chain is extremely risky. So they reached out to the whale, but the whale never responded. They never even responded to Solend's requests, and they proposed that they wanted to take over the whale's account. So what they did is they issued a public vote, which is intended to grant emergency power to temporarily take over the whale's account so they can liquidate via OTC. So an over-the-counter deal could be used to liquidate this whale instead of, letting it get liquidated on-chain on the open market. Now, this is tricky, right? Because what they're essentially doing is they're stepping in and they're saying, let's manually dictate what this whale can and can't do. Now, for a DeFi protocol to step in and actually manipulate funds here, I think is ludicrous. Now, I get that they're trying to kind of protect user funds, but at the same time, they are literally using that as an excuse to come in and provide a central authority over a decentralized protocol. So protocols like this, they operate in the realm of DeFi. So the whole essence of them is to be decentralized, right? But them stepping in is basically centralized intervention, which kind of goes against my ethos from a decentralization standpoint. And I think it really, highlights the issues Solana's faced as well. Solana gets a lot of criticism that it's a centralized chain, and this certainly doesn't help the narrative at all, because it's just adding more fuel to the fire, and it's just adding more public backlash. And we saw the backlash was massive after this proposal broke out. Many, many massive names. We had Emin, the founder of AVAX, Fatman Terra, Coach Crypto, Kobe, CZ, Binance, all come out and just say how stupid it was. Emin said, "What on earth is this?" Kobe labeled it as comedy, and we basically had the entirety of crypto Twitter coming out and saying how ludicrous this entire situation was. So I think personally, if we learnt anything from the Celsius and 3AC situations, if we learned anything from what went down over the last week, and I believe we should, because we have to take these downside experiences as a learning experience, it's that on-chain transparency is so important now more than ever. With centralized entities gaining more control in crypto, we have to step back and look at why crypto was created, and DeFi especially was created for the sole purpose of having on-chain transparency and not allowing these entities to actually manipulate and control prices. And that is a much needed component of crypto, and that's why DeFi was created in the first place. So to have kind of, a Solend acting as a bank and stepping in as an intermediary here, that's a negative sign in my opinion, because it does go against the DeFi ethos, and it's not something that we love to see. And SBF, funnily enough, agreed with this sentiment. He didn't agree with the Solend sentiment, obviously, because he has a vested interest in Solana, being a major shareholder, and Alameda being a big investor. But he agreed with the ethos that DeFi and on-chain transparency is so important in the face of the 3AC situation. He said it couldn't have happened without an on-chain protocol that was transparent. So SBF agrees with the sentiment. So, why wouldn't he agree with the Solend sentiment then? Because that's exactly the argument that he was making. Despite the backlash, though, and this is the crazy part, guys, despite the backlash to the proposal, everyone hated it. 97.5% voted yes. 97.5% voted yes. Now, why would they do this? This is where things get really, really interesting, because it turns out that 90% of the votes on this proposal were issued by a single user. So the fate of a $270 million asset pool, which is the total pool of assets for users on the Solend platform, is effectively being decided by a single entity. Now, this is a fundamental flaw in the system, in my opinion, because the whole point of a DAO is essentially to give governance voting rights back to the people. Like a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, the entire point of that is to give power to the people and allow them to vote on issues that matter to the community. But since the voting system is rigged based on the percentage of the DAO tokens you hold, which is a function of a DAO and potentially a downfall of a DAO in these situations, it allowed one singular whale to step in and actually vote on the fate of these assets. He made up 90% of the total vote. So the people were angry at this. The people kind of said, this is not okay. 90% of the votes should not be constituted by one whale, and we need to change this. So Solend kind of backtracked a little bit, and they said, all right, let's take the initial proposal down, let's invalidate it, and then let's increase the governance voting time to a day. So they issued a new proposal on the back of the first proposal, and the whale said that he'd rather salvage $120 million of retail money than holding up a DeFi ethos for some whale that is degenerately gambling. Now, I don't agree with this. Because the DeFi ethos at the end of the day is all we have in DeFi. So if we start going against this and start intervening, although user protection is very important, it kind of just degrades everything we're trying to build here, right? Like, I really don't get the logic there, because the decision to invalidate the vote highlights the issue of, what's the point of a DAO proposal if the outcomes aren't adhered to? If the outcomes of a proposal, so, the vote that passed as a yes, isn't adhered to, then that invalidates the entire point of a DAO in the first place. And then secondly, the fact Solend could just delete the first proposal and then create a second proposal adds fuel to the fire, because that is essentially manipulating another vote, which goes against, the entire point of a DAO as well. So the initial proposal was A, fundamentally flawed, and B, far too easily manipulated by a singular party, in my opinion. In addition, canceling the proposal basically invalidates the very authority a DAO claims to have in the first place, and it's a double whammy of decentralization, degradation. And that is exactly how I would summarize this scenario. So, interestingly, FBS came out during this FUD. Obviously, a lot of FUD off the back of this, directed towards Solana, directed towards Solend. SBF comes out and he says, it'd be ironic if Solana vanquished most of its validator issues once and for all as the 2021 era bull run ended. Shit timing. Also, entirely possible, there are real solutions coming, some of which have been deployed. Now, this is very, very, very interesting, because SBF has not talked about Solana for months, and he's finally coming out now, and now he's saying that, potentially they could vanquish these validator issues and that there's real solutions coming. So there's two things to take away from this. The first thing is a little bit of skepticism, because, why was SBF so quiet during the Solana outages? Why did he not speak out when the price was stable? Why did he wait for the biggest dip Solana's had in months to actually speak out against this and, start raising these issues? That's the first question. So there has been, speculation, and I won't lean into this too much, but speculation, he's trying to save his bags or pump his bags. I won't comment on that side of things. But then the positive side of things is that if he's telling the truth here and real solutions are coming, then potentially, that solves one of the biggest issues, that Solana has. Now, I personally think that Solana will eventually solve its issues. I don't think it's really a question of that. Sorry, I'm still a little bit sick. I don't think it's necessarily a question of whether Solana will fix its issues. I think it's coming. I think the question is more, by the time Solana fixes these issues, will other L1s take up a percentage of Sol's market share to the point that by the time the network is stable or at the level where people expect it to be, that it can't regain market share? And that's the biggest threat overall for Solana. It's not that the tech right now, because we know it's new tech. We know it's going to take a while to fix. It's more the issue of, in the future, could this potentially spell trouble, for Solana's market share going forward? Because although the Solend situation is more a negative for Solend than it is for Solana, like, I truly believe that this entire concern doesn't actually affect Sol as much as it affects Solend. I think it's more, it more lends itself to the decentralization argument more than it does the Solana argument. It's still very valid to look into Solana's network concerns, because that is one of the major talking points at the moment. So what are kind of the takeaways from this? I'm going to get into my actual trade in a second, but what are the three main takeaways to summarize that entire summary? The first one is that Solend is most affected here. And it also is that the 2230 level is very important to look at for Sol. So we know 2230 on the Sol charts coincides with slightly below this previous trend line. We could see the horizontal, if we did draw it in, would be around here. So it would be a new low for Solana in many, many months, almost over a year. It will be a new low if we reach that level. And that's the key liquidation price to keep your eye on, because if this whale does get liquidated and there isn't a resolution, then that could potentially see Sol see the high teens in terms of a price target. So just keep your eye on that. I'm not saying it'll happen, but it's one to watch. And I think more importantly, this situation highlights the argument of decentralization. This is the major talking point. This is a classic case of need versus want in crypto. What we want as a community is decentralization. What we need is user protection. And this is unfortunate because it's this constant toing and froing, because we're not at a point where decentralization can sustain user protection and full decentralization all at once. That's just kind of like a pipe dream at the moment, really. Like, decentralization is essentially something we're striving towards. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. And unfortunately, it does create issues in the meantime, because sometimes it tips further in one to one side of the scale than the other. In this side of the scale, it tipped further towards the need, which is the user protection side, and it kind of let decentralization be the secondary afterthought, because Solend, basically invalidated a proposal, issued a new one. It was manipulated by a single whale, and then also Solana is also highly centralized, relatively speaking. So there's been too much of a trade-off in this situation. So striving for a healthy balance is what we need to progress as an industry. It's so important. So am I accumulating Sol? Am I buying Sol in the midst of all this? At this very minute, no. I'm actually looking at a short trade, and I'll show you my setup right now for a potential short, because I do think in the short term there are probably more headwinds to do with this discussion. So I'll show you that setup. But long term, as a long-term accumulator, because we know that trading only makes up a smaller portion of my portfolio, I actually am accumulating Sol now. This might sound crazy because I've just talked about how bad centralization is, but I'm kind of betting on the issues of centralization being an issue of the past. I'm going to back SBF's claims that they are working on a solution. We already know Solana did raise the gas floor, meaning that it is less likely the network can be DDoS attacked. And in the meantime, they're working on fundamental changes to their consensus, which is a proof of history consensus mechanism, which will see a lot of these kind of attacks become less frequent. And obviously that paves the way for a more decentralized network. Now, that is a very long-term vision. So I'm very much betting on Solana, as a tech improving on these issues. And that's why I'm DCAing long-term. That's my long-term bag. Now, in the short term, there are so many headwinds that a short does, make a little bit of sense here overall. So that's something I want to have a look at now. So if we look at the Solana chart, and we look at these key levels, we did get this breakdown from the 41, and the breakdown coincided with the 3AC news. the Celsius news resulting in a $26 Solana. So we did see a nice push up in this channel. We see kind of this rising channel here that we are flirting with at the moment. Now, do I short this channel on the retest? Probably not. So there is one argument to be made that you could short this right now and then hopefully, take a quick scalp down to the $30 region. The issue with this is that the altcoins are highly dictated by Bitcoin's price movement. Now, I am seeing for Bitcoin potentially a push up to this 21.5 to 23K region. We know that this is kind of the region, that we want to come and test. So if we do come up to this region and we kind of hover in this region for a little bit, that is going to provide a much more clear short than trading Solana on its own. So what would the price levels of Solana coincide with at that level? I think we probably see a breakout of this trend now. We are seeing us break through at the moment. If we do break through this triangle, then the next level is obviously this range, this 36 to 37 level. And then the next level is this big box here, which is 37 to 43. So potentially opening a short at the $37 level, if Bitcoin coincides with a push up or a rejection rather from this zone, that could be a good play. So I'm thinking of laddering it. I'm thinking of doing one at 37, maybe one at 38, and then maybe one up here as well, 30% each time. Taking very small leverage and then setting my stop just above this next level. So in this region here, the $39 to $40 region. I like to do my stops based on percentages. I'm usually willing to take a 20% hit on a trade, my overall trade position. So if I put in $1,000, I'm willing to set my stop at a 20%. So a $200 loss in that case would be kind of like the stop that I look at. So that's a potential trade setup that I do like. But you guys have to remember that the trades, the short-term trades, so whether we go into a Bitcoin short or a long, those trades are with a small percentage of your portfolio, and they aren't substituting, the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that I'm actually accumulating Solana. That is the bigger picture. I do want a DCA because I believe that Solana is kind of positioning itself to be the NFT blockchain. That's kind of the essence of the tech, right? It is positioning itself to be the number one NFT blockchain and gaming blockchain. And I think that narrative, if they fix their issues, is strong enough to carry it forward. In the short term, though, we can look at shorting a lot of these altcoins. Even AVAX is showing some weakness as well. We see, this is in another one of those ranges where these white boxes here are dictating potentially a short opportunity. So let's just keep our eyes on this. I'm not going to open it live on the show because I'm on the 4 hourly right now. So just to give you an idea of timing, the 4 hourly candles may take a day to set up. We know that they take 1, 2, 3, 4. Potentially, we don't see a setup for a day, which is fine. We just need to be patient. I'm not into rushing trades in this market, so I'm happy to kind of sit back and kind of just give you guys these levels for now, and then we can have a look at opening a trade potentially in the next day if Bitcoin pushes up into this region and then starts to break down, which is a very, very likely scenario because we know that there is a lot of sell pressure right now. There's a lot of sell pressure with Solana at the moment. And that's a trade that I'm looking at. Obviously, if you do want to get involved with the trades and you are taking part in the trading at the moment, I highly recommend signing up for a ByBit account, link in the description. We did start a new game show. I don't know if you guys know, but we started this game show called Whale Games. It's where we do live questions on the show through a quiz style format. And if you answer the questions right and you finish top 3, you actually get paid. So we gave $1,000. Let me just go onto Rand's Twitter to see how much money we gave out to you guys. We gave $1,000 to first place. We gave $500 to second place, and then we gave another $500 to third place. So we gave $2,000. And I think there's going to be another episode of Whale Games within the next 24 hours. So you guys got to stay tuned for that on the channel. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you have notifications turned on for the channel because we're literally giving away free money here. So the way to actually enter these games when they're live is, and they go live sporadically, so you don't know when they're going to go live. Sometimes they'll be during the shows, so you're going to have to watch the shows, Rand's show, Sheldon's, my shows, because we will be doing the live Whale Games during my shows and Rand's shows. But they're also going to get standalone uploads or episodes where we upload, and you got to be on the ball. You got to have post notifications turned on if you want to make sure you're on top of that. So you could potentially win money. We're literally just giving away money, in exchange for these games, which is really cool because, at the end of the day, we want to give back to the community right now, because at the moment, it's a tough market. We know a lot of you guys are finding it tough. So, we want to make it a little better. And, we've negotiated some good deals for you guys to get some free money at the moment. But you do need a ByBit account to do it because the numbers you see here are ByBit user numbers. So if you're not signed up for ByBit, now is the last chance to do it before the whale games. So there's a link in the description of my show. If you click it and sign up, you get the deposit bonus for depositing. You also have a chance to get your portfolio 10x on the show. And now you're also going to have potential to get involved in the whale games as well. So you're going to need a ByBit account for the whale games. So sign up, link in the description, sign up using that link. It helps support the channel and it also helps support your bags as well. So that is one thing we can look at doing over the next couple of days, which I think is going to be super fun. And that is kind of the Solana trade at the moment. So those are the two things I'm doing. I'm looking at a Solana short term. Remember, guys, I'm not a professional trader, but it is something I do with a small percentage of my portfolio. Now, long term, I know you guys are interested to know a bit more about my strategy, and you guys know that I am DCAing through this. I am not interested in timing the bottom. I'm really not interested in waiting. We know waiting usually spells trouble. Many in 2017, 2018 saw Bitcoin rise from 3.7 to 7. They said it was a dead cat bounce. Bitcoin rose to 10K. People said it'll come back down, and then it just never came down, and people missed out. And that's the exact same thing with Bitcoin at the moment. Now, I'm not saying a FOMO in because it won't come back down. What I'm saying is that you will miss the potential upside if you just wait for the bottom. So what is, the way to actually counter this? I believe it's DCAing. So taking generational buying opportunities like we're seeing from a lot of these major alts, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and then, some of these big L1s, and actually starting to deploy. I know Rand bought like 38 Bitcoin on the weekend. I bought some Ethereum. I've been DCAing into some of these L1s and actually looking at these key levels, these key blue boxes as DCA zones. Major DCA zone here, major DCA zone here, and consistently doing it over time. Because let's say you invest over a 5-week period into Bitcoin at 20K, 17.5, 15, 12.5, and 10. Your average buy price is now 15. So no, in this case, if the bottom's 10, you didn't catch the exact bottom. You didn't get the 10K bottom, but what you did was you averaged in throughout all of those entries, and overall your entry price is going to be very low. So your cost basis will set you up in an advantageous position. So when this market does recover from maybe a catalyst like QT easing or, an ETF or any number, an institution adopting Bitcoin, any number of catalysts that could occur, you're now in a position where your cost basis is very low, and you can actually take advantage of this upside. Because I haven't lost any conviction in this market. To do with these altcoins, to do with Bitcoin, I haven't lost any conviction. I have lost conviction in the crappy Ponzi's, the crappy protocols which don't have runway and won't survive. But the projects I know will survive and I know have runway, like your Bitcoins, like your Ethereums, like some of these major L1s. I'll give you a couple more examples: Polkadot, Nia. Even Solana to a smaller extent. Obviously, it's got issues, so you got to be a little careful. But, even Solana, those ones I'm comfortable DCAing into long term and just building out my position. So, yes, now's not the time to be crazily risky with your bets, but at the same time, you can actually afford to DCA because, that is how you build wealth in a bear market. You accumulate when prices are low, right? And also, if you want to take note of some of these tweets, you guys know I'm crazy on the tweets and these threads. If you want to read through this a little bit more and find out what happened to Sol and my opinions on decentralization, you can follow my Twitter. There's a link in the description. I post basically all the time on Twitter. I'm like a Twitter addict. It's crazy. And I post these massive threads to help you guys because I think it's important to break down the events that are happening in the market, or, because I want to keep you guys updated, give you guys concrete data, concrete facts, and then also my own opinions to help you guys throughout this market at the moment. So yeah, this is one of the threads that I posted, and my Twitter link is in the description at Miles Deutscher if you want to check that out. So yeah, another crazy day on the crypto markets. Another crazy week on the crypto markets. But that's kind of why we love crypto, and also kind of why it frustrates us at times, because it's such a crazy fast-paced industry, and it's super important to stay on top of things. And that's what we're here to do with this channel and my Twitter, etc., is to help you guys stay on top of it, and help navigate you guys through these times. So that's what we'll do. We'll catch you in whale games in the near future. Hopefully you guys enjoy that. Remember, link in the description to sign up for that. And I'll also catch you in tomorrow's show, where I'll be talking about a little bit more as to what the future of DeFi actually is, and whether DeFi is dead or not. So I think that'll be a really interesting show in 24 hours. Thank you guys so much for watching. Appreciate all of you. I see you guys all in the comments. Nelly, William, Corey, Eddie, I see all of you. Ryan, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in tomorrow's show. See you in the next one. Peace out.